Welcome to this week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. I'm Jon Strum, and I'm the host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. I'm a past member of the International Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee, and currently I'm a district activist leader and trustee for the National MS Society, and I chair the Society's California Government Relations Advisory Committee. The MS Society's Ask an MS Expert webcast is designed to give us a place for the MS community to connect and to connect you with MS experts who are ready to answer your questions on the topics that impact people affected by MS every day. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. MS navigators are online throughout today's program, answering those questions and connecting you to resources. As most people living with MS know, multiple sclerosis can have a significant impact on your emotions. And one of the most common emotional responses to MS is grief. Dr. Rosalind Kalb is with us today to explain this relationship between MS and grief. And she has some steps and strategies you can use to better cope with grief. Dr. Kalb is a clinical psychologist and the senior programs consultant at Can Do MS. She's a past vice president of the Professional Resource Center at the National MS Society. She's authored a number of publications about multiple sclerosis, and Dr. Kalb has specialized in MS care and education for almost 40 years. Welcome, Roz. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm thrilled to be here, John.
Well, to get us started, can you give us a definition of grief?
You know, it's an interesting question because when I first started talking about grief 35 years ago to people with MS, they said, well, who's died? Nobody's died. Why are you mentioning grief? And I think it's important for us to recognize that grief is a natural response anytime something is lost to us or taken away from us that we value. So of course it can be a loved one who dies or a pet, but it can also be our sense of self, our self-image, for example, or beloved activities that we used to do and can no longer do because MS or another disease has taken them away. So it's a process of dealing with loss in whatever way we can.
Well, nearly 1 million people in the United States are diagnosed with MS, and as you just alluded to, many at some point can experience grief. What kinds of losses are people who are living with MS grieving?
So I think the first one that happens is when the doctor delivers that news, you have multiple sclerosis. Because over a lifetime, whether it's lasted 16 years or 25 years or 40 years, that lifetime has resulted in a picture of oneself, right? A picture that we carry around of who we are, what we're able to do, what our likes and dislikes are, and so on. And suddenly the doctor has given information that makes one have to change that picture a little bit. I'm not quite the person that I was before, and I have to figure out how I'm going to put this new bit of information about myself into my self-image. So that's the first time that grief really happens, because that is a grieving process when you let go of the old picture that you had of yourself and begin the process of creating a somewhat different picture. But then MS asks people to adapt and change over and over and over again. Every time there's a relapse or a symptom that takes away an ability or changes the way one has to do things, that is a loss. So being unable to do the hobby that you love to do, or needing to use a piece of mobility equipment to help you do something, or having to change a career that you loved, or even your plans for the future, any of those changes can initiate a grieving process.
Well, to your point, we heard from Margaret, and Margaret's wondering if she'll ever stop feeling sad. Will that feeling go away over time?
That's a great question. And I think it differs for different people. I think after one loses a loved one, or one loses a cherished part of one's life due to MS, there may be an undercurrent of sadness that you tap into periodically, and you feel that intense grief again. But nature has a way of helping us heal with grief. And so over time, we gradually adapt and adjust and come to terms with our loss until another loss comes along. So I always envision that the grieving process and the feeling of sadness to kind of ebb and flow over the course of the disease as changes happen. So some of that sadness may never go away, but I think you'll find moments of joy and the ability to participate and feel good about the things going on in your life in spite of some sadness.
We heard from Joan, who says that she's been feeling sad for quite some time. Joan says she may be grieving, or she's wondering if she's depressed. So how can someone distinguish between grief and depression?
It's a great question and a really important one. You may not be able to distinguish yourself after a period of time. You may need to consult with somebody who can help you tease it out. And there was just recently some interesting research which talked about how grieving can become an extended process for some people. They are not depressed, but the grieving process just goes on much longer than one would expect, a year or 2 years. People can still enjoy some things, they can still go on with their lives, but this intense feeling of loss is there. And there's some controversy about whether one should treat that as you would treat depression, or whether you should just live with it and be supported by mental health professionals as well as your support network as you continue to deal with grief. Depression is actually very different. And the criteria for depression, of course, is that you feel sad, down in the dumps, all day long, every day for an extended period of time, and or that you just lose interest in things that you used to find enjoyable. You just don't engage with the world and you don't care about engaging the world. And that's in addition to things like sleep problems or changes in eating or changes in your thinking. So if you're not sure, that's an absolutely perfect time to ask your healthcare provider or an MS navigator at the National MS Society to refer you to someone who can help you tease out what's going on and determine what kinds of support or treatment would be most helpful for you.
You know, we talked to one of the National MS Society's MS navigators who said that she talks to so many people who explain how they're feeling. And when she suggests they may be grieving, their response is they didn't even realize that's what they were actually experiencing, what they were feeling themselves. Why is it so important to name grief?
I think it's important to name it because it's a normal, healthy response to loss. And when you recognize that you're feeling that loss, you are more able to reach out for support, whether it's from friends and family or from a professional or an MS support group or whomever, to share that feeling of loss, get the support that you need, because that's the process that helps you toward healing, right? So naming it is what helps you take action to get to a more comfortable place.
Grief is often described as a process rather than a single state or emotion. Mm-hmm. Many people have heard about the 5 stages of grief. These are most often associated with grieving in connection to someone's death, as you alluded to at the beginning of our program. And these 5 stages include denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. Do these stages hold true for someone diagnosed with MS? And does everyone go through all 5 stages, and do they go through them in exactly the same order?
Well, I have to say, John, that if you lined up several psychologists, you might get a different answer to the question. My personal belief, after working for so many years with people with MS, is that an individual may experience any or all of those aspects of grief that you just described. I certainly don't think they happen in a particular order, and you may find yourself intensely sad, and then at moments intensely angry. And then you might say to yourself, look, if you can help me hold on to my cognition, I will give up my walking, which is what we think of as bargaining, right? But that may change from day to day or moment to moment, or one episode of grief related to one loss may be very different from the way you experience the grief over a next loss. So I don't think that there's that kind of rhyme or reason to it. And you kind of have to go with the flow and be open to what you're feeling and accepting of what you're feeling so that you can deal with it.
We heard from Mark, and this is a question that really relates to something you were just talking about a moment ago. Mark's wondering if he should seek help in dealing with his feelings. And I guess it begs the question, how does someone know if they should seek help, and what type of professional should they be talking to?
Of course, I'm biased. You know, I think as a mental health provider who's had a wonderful career getting to know people living with MS and dealing with life's changes, getting help is never the wrong answer. It's just never the wrong answer. It's when you feel ready to reach out and to know what it is you're looking for. Are you looking for somebody to help you figure out exactly what's going on? Like, is it grief? Is it depression? Is this protracted grieving that they're now talking about? What kinds of treatment would be available? Is it more of a coaching relationship with somebody, or a more psychotherapeutic, or would medication be helpful? You can't answer these questions yourself. A professional needs to help you with that. That being said, finding a mental health professional that you can work with is not always a slam dunk. You may need to meet 1 or 2 people to find somebody that you click with and feel comfortable with and that you trust. And there's nothing wrong with that. It might be a psychologist like myself, or a psychiatric nurse practitioner, meaning a nurse practitioner who has specialized in mental health issues. It could be a social worker who does clinical work as well as social work, or a counselor. People call themselves different things, and there's different licensure for all of this. Any of that is okay. The most important thing is that you find someone that you personally feel safe, comfortable, and connected to.
I think it's reassuring to understand that grief is a common and natural reaction to an MS diagnosis. But can you explain the difference between normal, or what I'll call healthy, grief and prolonged, pervasive, or complicated grieving?
I think even in the midst of pretty intense grief, one may feel very, very sad, but still able to find moments of enjoyment in daily life, still have interest in things like a hobby, or spending time with a grandchild, or hanging out with a good friend, or seeing a beloved old movie. You can have those moments of enjoyment even while sad. That's why things like wakes are so important, right? You have a grief, but you share connections with other people. We talk about complicated grieving when people can't reconnect with the world. They find it hard to engage with their work or with friends. Their sleep may be impaired, or they may lose their appetite. They just are not really functional because they're kind of immersed in the grief. And that's when it's important to tease out, is this complicated grief? Is this depression that might mean a different kind of treatment is necessary? It's not an easy distinction, Jon.
Our emotions influence how we feel physically, how we take care of ourselves, how we relate to other people, and so much more. So learning to manage and cope with grief is an important component to anyone's overall wellness. We just heard from Jeremy, who told us he's finding it difficult to adjust to a diagnosis of a disease that is so unpredictable. And he wants to know what he can do to better adapt to defining himself as someone living with MS.
I love that question, Jeremy, because again, it's a process, and it may be one step forward and two steps back occasionally, right? Because the adaptation means being willing to look at yourself slightly differently than you did before. But it also means being willing to be adventurous. Could I try some new activities that I've never tried before, because the ones I used to enjoy all the time are challenging now? Or could I experiment with mobility devices that might make it possible for me to do some things that I love in an adapted way? But the adaptation, and I think the key to the adaptation, is you want to make space in your life for MS, because it's there and it's not going away, but you don't want to give it any more space or time or energy than it absolutely needs. MS can be really greedy, right? So your job as you work to adapt to this is to say, how do I keep MS in its place? How do I make my life as full, enjoyable, interesting, stimulating as it can possibly be, in spite of whatever limitations MS throws at me? Connecting with other people, the National MS Society, Can Do MS, in your community, that can help a lot, because you can learn from other people how they've done it and get ideas, really creative ideas for how to stay on top of this.
We heard from Tina, and Tina says she's feeling guilty about the extra burden she feels she's putting on her family. How can Tina resolve some of those feelings of guilt?
Talk about them with her family. I think she would be surprised to hear that they want to be supportive and be helpful, but she can also ask them, how can I continue to support you, even if my abilities have changed, even if I'm not quite in the same place I was before MS, there's still things I have to offer you. So maybe there's some things I could do that would ease your pressures, take some of the work or chores off your hands. So give me some things to do that are within my abilities. Because in our relationship, I want us each to be giving and receiving, so that we all feel taken care of, not just me.
We heard from Barbara, and she's asking for some tips or strategies for coping with grief when it does strike. What advice can you give, Barbara?
So Barbara, it's going to be a little bit of trial and error for you, because it is for everybody. Everybody's process of dealing with grief is different. For some people, it means taking those really down moments and connecting with a close friend or support person who gets it and can just listen or give you a hug or do whatever it is that feels best for you. Other people need to be alone at that moment, and journaling, just writing down the feelings. You don't have to write a book, just a little note or a paragraph where you track your feelings, get them out on paper so that you can look at them. Other people need to just distract themselves by turning on a wonderful old movie or doing a project, a craft project of some kind. It doesn't matter what it is, it's whatever feels best to you. What I just urge you to be cautious about is this is the kind of situation where very emotional eating happens, emotional drinking happens, or other unhealthy behaviors. And people talk about this a lot when we talk about nutrition. They say, all of my challenges around food seem to be around my emotions. So just to be on the lookout for that I'd rather see you using some of these other outlets for your feelings that are healthier for you.
Can you take a moment to talk about resilience and how positive psychology can help people address grief and other challenges of living with MS?
We all have resilience within us. We know that some people are born with a higher resilience quotient, for lack of a better word, than other people, but it's a skill in many ways that we can build on, that we can increase for ourselves. And the magical thing about resilience is that it comes from experiences that challenge us, but allow us to master them. So you go through an intense or painful loss, for example, or something that really frightens you. But you tap your resources, you come up with some coping strategies like the ones we've talked about. And in a day or two, you look around and you realize that some of the clouds have cleared. And you breathe again and you say, oh, I kind of feel like myself. So you've crested that mountain. And what that does for you is to remind you that if you encounter such a challenge or mountain again, you have some confidence that you can do it because you did it before. That's how we build resilience. So I think some of the positive psychology strategies that people use that are helpful is to monitor your self-talk. We frequently talk to ourselves in very negative, critical terms, but it's very helpful to spend a little time thinking about your strengths, your talents, your problem-solving abilities, times when you've been successful in the past, and how can you use what you learned before again. Practicing gratitudes is another positive psychology technique that people tell me helps them fall asleep, helps build their confidence, helps them feel happier because we tend to think about the lousy stuff rather than the blessings. And I think that participating in support groups or programs where you have the opportunity to show your creativity, your strengths, your solutions to other people and help them is one of the most positive things you can do for building your own confidence and resilience.
Well, thank you for sharing some important insights on how to best manage and cope with grief if you're living with MS. Now, Roz, what would you say are the top 3 takeaways that you'd like our viewers to remember?
It's really hard. I think first and foremost is that grief is normal and healthy, and you shouldn't be scared of it. It's part of the process of living. If you are uncertain what's going on, I strongly encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional and get some help sorting out what's what. And I reminded you that you have a wide range of professionals who can help you do that. I think that being willing to try new things or do old things in a different, more adaptive way is a very positive strategy for keeping your life active, for building your resilience. And if all else fails and you're feeling really down, go help somebody else. Because in helping somebody else, you will feel better.
Well, thank you for sharing your expertise with us, Roz. I think we have time for another question. We heard from Mary, who told us her friends just don't seem to understand what it's like to live with MS, and she ends up feeling isolated and alone, even in a crowd. She's not sure where to turn. What advice might you have?
Well, I think I have two pieces of advice. One is, Mary, think about how you have explained MS to the people around you. Most often they don't understand, because it's impossible for them to totally understand what's going on, since most of MS is the iceberg beneath the surface. All they can see is the tip of the iceberg, and they don't get it. So think about how you can give them examples, share reading materials, invite them to ask questions. That's one. They will never understand it the way you do. The second is to form some connections, whether it's through the MS Society or Can Do MS or any other MS organization. Share some connections with other people who do get it, because that can be one of the most reassuring things people say, to sit in a room, virtual or in person, with people who get it. And you don't have to keep re-explaining yourself.
I heard you mention support groups a couple of minutes ago, and we heard from Mark, and he's actually thinking about joining a support group, but he wonders if hearing what others are going through will actually lift him up or bring him down. What would you tell Mark about support groups?
I think support groups are as variable as the people in them and as the disease of MS itself. There are some groups, I sort of put them in three categories in my mind, which is probably being kind of concrete. But one kind of group, people sit around and complain. They don't share strategies. They don't learn. They just complain. And those can be downers, because nobody leaves feeling on top of the world after 90 minutes or so of hearing downer stories. There's another kind of group where it's primarily informational. Guest speakers come in, they talk, they teach, and that's great. But again, you're learning from experts, but you're not learning from each other. The best kinds of support groups I've seen are those where people come in with their problem-solving hats on. They want to hear each other's challenges and share challenges, but they are equally invested in thinking about ways to overcome those challenges. What tools, what resources, what ideas have you tried? What's worked, what hasn't? It is a very energizing, exciting process to be part of, and people leave uplifted. They leave with notes of things they want to try. Then they come back and report their successes or their challenges. And so in answer to your question, you may need to shop a little bit to find what you're looking for in a support group. It may take 1 or 2 or 3 tries before you find the fit that's right for you.
I want to thank everyone who submitted questions, and thank you for being with us today, Roz.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure. Take care, everybody. Stay well.
Before we close, I want to remind you that the National MS Society's MS Navigator team is your best partner when it comes to connecting you to the best information and resources on living with MS. You can reach an MS Navigator by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. For information and resources on MS, please visit the Society's website. You'll find research updates and news, information on connection programs like self-help groups and MS Friends, ways for you to get involved, and you'll hear about upcoming events that are taking place near you. Remember, you can connect with the National MS Society and others affected by MS on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I hope you'll join me every week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where I continue the conversation that we start here. You'll find Real Talk MS at realtalkms.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. I'd like to thank Ros Kalb for joining us today. Please remember that a recording of this webinar will be available at the Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. I hope you'll join us at this same time for next week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. You can always find our upcoming program topics on the National MS Society's website. And now I have a favor to ask each of you. Getting your feedback on today's webcast is important. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, you'll see a link to a survey pinned to the comments section. And on YouTube, you'll find that link in the program description. Completing the survey makes a real difference. The information you provide helps us continuously improve, and it helps shape future programs. The survey takes just 1 minute, so I hope you'll take a minute to fill it out. On behalf of Dr. Rosalind Kalb and the National MS Society, I want to thank you once again for joining us. Please stay safe and make healthy choices.